Darkness enveloped the endless void. Suspended in the abyss, the galactic assembly shimmered, not from grandeur, but from gravity. Here, representatives of worlds far older and stronger than Earth gathered. Each one carried the weight of civilizations, of empires that had outgrown their own stars, of minds sharpened over millennia. They sat in silence, not because they feared words, but because they understood their value. One by one, the delegates rose to speak. Each offered a measured recital of dominance. One praised solar harvesting arsenals that eclipsed moons, another boasted gene-forging chambers where species could be rebuilt in hours. Some wielded weapons that warped time, others displayed command over thought-based navigation. Their voices were calm, proud, unshaken, the tone of entities who had rarely been told no. Then came Earth's representative. He stood last. His attire was modest compared to the obsidian crests and plasma-threaded robes around him. No glowing sigils, no kinetic armor. Just fabric and firmness. He did not project grandeur, but presence, a kind that required no amplification. He didn't boast. He didn't exaggerate. He simply described. Our world offers no ancient empire, no weapons that bend physics. What we have is subtler. Earth bears what we call G-Nemadian, vital blessings. These are elements, environments, and energies not artificially crafted but grown. Our soil enhances cognitive patterns in synthetic systems. Our magnetic layers intensify neural signal transfer in biotech. The molecules in our waters evolve adaptive algorithms in AI. He paused. No drama, no emphasis. Just a fact laid bare. You seek conquest. We cultivate resilience. You speak of control. We refine cooperation. The power we possess is quiet, not because it is weak, but because it is deep. He sat. No applause followed. No rebuttal. Just silence, and eyes. The change was subtle but undeniable. Delegates who had once overlooked Earth now watched him. Some blinked slower, recalibrating thought. Some tilted heads slightly, reanalyzing data. Earth, that wild, unstable, blue world, had suddenly revealed that it held keys others hadn't even known they were searching for. When the session recessed, the room fractured into whispers. The public smiles remained in place, but the air had shifted. Inside chambers, behind energy-sealed doors, quiet conversations ignited. Neural enhancement? From Earth's soil? Cognitive resonance? From a planet that still burns wood in places? No claim of weaponry, but the very essence of every weapon's potential? The hunger was not loud, but it was real. Delegates began contacting analysts, dispatching instructions, encrypting signals to their home worlds. Some ordered further scans on Earth's atmospheric frequencies. Others quietly scheduled diplomatic overtures. And a few already began calculating the margins of invasion. The Earth delegate stepped into the corridor. He saw the glances. He noticed the quick eye contact between representatives who hadn't looked twice at each other before. Nothing was said aloud, but he understood. He boarded the transit vessel in silence, and by the time he crossed the atmosphere of the Assembly's host ring, he had already sent an encrypted report. Observation: our presence has triggered unexpected strategic attention. While my tone was reserved, Earth's latent potential appears to have been received with intensity. I cannot quantify the level of interest yet, but I suggest early-stage counter-strategy modeling. Interest is drifting into ambition. He received no reply for hours. Back home, the report was reviewed, then dismissed. A defense minister laughed softly. They're intrigued by our dirt now? Others nodded. Let them look. What can they possibly gain? We have no fleets, no power spheres. The Earth is peaceful, irrelevant. But the Assembly's reaction had not been irrelevant. For certain delegates, Earth had become more than a curious blue dot. It had become an opportunity, not to admire, but to take. And in the quiet halls of their minds, a dangerous conclusion had started to bloom. If Earth's G-Nemadian could be harnessed, not shared, it could alter the galactic balance. It could make one world the center of everything. And power, true power, was rarely earned. It was seized. The representative knew this. He had seen it in their eyes. He knew peace was temporary. Interest would become intent. Intent would become action. He also knew Earth wasn't ready. Not yet. The whispers did not die with the adjournment. If anything, they multiplied, quiet transmissions rippling through subspace, layered in diplomatic code, invisible to those who weren't looking. But the Earth's delegate had been looking. He hadn't spoken of it on the return trip. He hadn't sent another warning. He simply observed, and what he observed was undeniable. Earth's name was now being spoken in rooms it had never entered before. The delegates had gone home, but they hadn't gone silent. One sent a quiet query to his planetary think tank. Run simulations. If Earth's atmospheric elements can amplify neurosynaptic fields, how would that affect command architecture in drone fleets? Another, more blunt, sent instructions to a Black Ops unit orbiting a rogue moon. Begin preliminary modeling for terrestrial terrain seizure. Target Earth. Objective, resource acquisition. The Earth delegates' concerns were reclassified as speculative. No official review. No preparations. No warnings sounded. Humanity's bureaucratic machine remained perfectly calm, blind to the gathering tide. The advisory boards dismissed his message as overcautious protocol. If there's no threat, one said over coffee, there's no need to plan for one. And if there is, we'd see something obvious. They didn't. But he wasn't alone in seeing the signs. The recording of his speech, captured and stored as public archive, had been flagged by someone else. Not an official. Not a general. Not a scientist. A civilian. A young systems engineer, buried in a forgotten corner of a remote research observatory. He had been listening to the assembly broadcasts out of personal curiosity, downloading interstellar transcripts as a hobby. But something in the Earth delegate's tone, and more so, in the silence that followed it, stuck with him. He replayed the delegate's statement 4 times. Then he opened the audio patterns for the alien responses. Not the words, the patterns. Cadence, stress changes, millisecond pauses. Micro-indicators of suppressed reactions. He'd seen this kind of response before. Not in politics, but in market data during hostile takeover negotiations. They weren't interested. They were planning. He wrote an internal memo. No one responded. He escalated. Still nothing. His position gave him no authority, and his name carried no weight. But his instinct was precise, and his gut was iron. So he did what no one asked of him. He started preparing. He cleared out a partition of his lab server and built a private sandbox simulation. He fed it data not from Earth's defense archives, but from the Assembly's own declarations. He simulated 16 potential assault vectors using alien strategies revealed, sometimes boastfully, during the summit. Then he overlaid Earth's topographical, logistical, and atmospheric data. The outcome wasn't theoretical. It was catastrophic. In scenario after scenario, Earth fell. Not because it was weak, but because it was open. Its defenses weren't aimed outward. Its intelligence networks weren't built for interstellar disinformation. Its militaries weren't calibrated for species that could weaponize gravity or erase satellites from parsecs away. He didn't panic. He adapted. He started constructing countermeasures. Not weapons, tactics. Not fleets, disruption protocols. He created mimic drones that could hijack alien targeting signals. He mapped electromagnetic weak zones where energy-based weapons would falter. He rerouted weather monitoring satellites into pattern tracking arrays that could flag abnormal orbital movement. All of it done in silence. Not from fear, from focus. He reached out to a former classmate now working in orbital communications. Posed a few hypothetical questions. Got answers. Then more contacts. A linguist. A propulsion mechanic. A retired military AI trainer. Piece by piece, a web began to form, informal, nameless, unpaid. But alert. Watching. Meanwhile, across the stars, more signals lit up. Delegates who once dismissed Earth as irrelevant were now gathering blueprints. Some called it a precaution. Others called it ambition. But the language was clear: Earth had something they wanted. And things that are wanted are eventually taken. One particular world, cold and steel-covered, issued a directive that skipped all diplomatic layers. Its fleet commander simply logged into his war board and began constructing a projection labeled Acquisition Terra. The timeline read, Feasibility window, 1 cycle. The young engineer never saw that file. He didn't need to. The patterns were all converging. The delay was no longer about if. It was about when. And no one with authority was acting. But he wasn't waiting for them. He wrote a final note in his personal archive. Earth isn't prepared. But I will be. Then he locked the terminal, closed the lab, and walked into the night, not as a civilian anymore, but as the first awake soul in a world fast asleep. He withdrew from ordinary life without ceremony. There was no resignation, no broadcasted farewell. One day, he was just another name in the logs. The next, he was invisible. But while the world kept rotating, he changed its rhythm. Quietly. Deliberately. He migrated his workspace to an abandoned seismic monitoring station buried beneath a mountain range. Obsolete on paper, discarded by the Geological Commission years ago, but still connected to deep cable infrastructure. Off-grid, unmonitored, and perfect. From there, he built what Earth hadn't, a war map that didn't rely on speculation, but on pattern convergence. He cataloged ship types mentioned in diplomatic tech disclosures. He modeled known alien propulsion signatures, reconstructed from open-source astronomy data and military edge feeds. He studied interspecies conflict logs, scraping subspace black channels that hadn't been filtered by Earth's oversight bodies. And what he found was uniform. When a resource-rich planet was identified, diplomacy was a performance. The real decisions were made elsewhere. He pulled in linguistic matrices, converting alien rhetoric into probability matrices. Preservation, when used by a certain reptilian faction, consistently preceded resource extraction missions. Shared prosperity, in insected dialects, typically followed by industrial suppression raids. Earth had been hearing invitations. He heard threats. He established a private relay mesh, makeshift, duct-taped with old relay satellites and reprogrammed weather drones. Not to broadcast, but to listen. He didn't need to shout into the void. He just needed to know when it began whispering back. Resources came from unlikely places. A retired astrophysicist, once shunned for fringe theories, sent him a personal data cube, encrypted logs of unexplained energy flux near Pluto's shadow belt. An amateur radio operator reported anomalous burst patterns originating from the Oort cloud, dismissed by authorities as solar interference. But the young man recognized the spread. It matched known alien communication waveforms. They were already triangulating. He expanded his operation. Built automated decoys, artificial data leaks seeded into public science channels, disguised as harmless Earth-based anomalies. He wanted them to notice. He needed to control the moment curiosity became motion. In parallel, he trained himself. Not in combat, but in decision systems. Neuro-conflict modeling. He ran endless simulations. If they come through Lagrange point 1, what's the vector delay on atmospheric reentry? How long before global defense systems detect energy surge if masked by solar flare? How many seconds would Earth have to respond before orbit broke? The answer, more often than not, was not enough. But he wasn't looking for perfect. He was preparing for inevitable. He devised a behavioral heuristic filter, a tool that mapped emotional deviation across alien broadcast frequencies. If a diplomat's tone sharpened by 0.4% in a certain range, if their public statements shortened by a specific margin, it flagged elevated urgency. Earth's institutions weren't watching this data. He was. And the algorithm told him what bureaucracy refused to admit: something was coming. He began designing a signal burst, not a warning, but a trigger. One that, when activated, would reroute Earth's passive orbital sensors into an active defense grid, shut down civilian access to primary uplinks, and force global network prioritization into encrypted protocols. It would only activate once. And only when he was certain. Still, he told no one in authority. Because Earth's leaders remained anchored to complacency. Their frameworks revolved around treaty law, commerce, predictable enemies. They didn't understand asymmetry. They didn't understand species that did not warn, only strike. They saw silence as peace. He saw it as preparation. More helpers joined. A quantum coder in New Kolkata started feeding him decryption pulses. A covert lab assistant from an aerospace contractor anonymously uploaded partial blueprints of an unfinished gravitic inhibitor, a project mothballed after budget cuts. A former Marine, medically discharged and long forgotten, began designing counter-ambush tactics for urban terrain. None of them met. They shared no names. But each of them understood, Earth's shield would not come from command centers. It would come from those no one noticed. The young man had no rank, no funding, no mandate. But what he had was clarity. While governments debated alien tourism protocols, he built contingency nodes. While think tanks modeled language translations, he developed false transmission packets to confuse enemy relays. While the world slept under stars it had romanticized, he watched those same stars begin to shift position. He wasn't waiting for invasion to prove him right. He was preparing so it wouldn't be the end. When the first cross-frequency spike hit his system, too symmetrical to be natural, too timed to be accident, he didn't flinch. He logged it, traced its echo, watched the pattern solidify. Then he quietly armed the trigger. Earth still didn't know. But it would. It began without spectacle. No dramatic flashes, no booming declarations. Just a shift in data, a silent alteration in the sky. Orbitals that weren't Earth started drifting into formation. Non-terrestrial mass signatures emerged from behind the moon, cloaked in false gravity shadows. Surveillance stations picked up inconsistencies, then went dark. Civilian satellites lost synchronization. Most systems dismissed the anomalies as solar interference. His didn't. He received 7 alerts within 12 seconds. All from different points, all confirming what he had anticipated. Multiple ships, differing configurations, non-human geometry, synchronized entry. This wasn't scouting. This was prelude. He activated the signal burst. In less than a second, Earth's passive grid transformed. Civilian channels were overridden, public networks rerouted. The sky was no longer open. Orbital sensors sharpened. Layers of redirection, obfuscation, and encryption snapped into place. Earth's awareness, though late, had been forced open. Governments responded in fragments. Confusion first. Then partial mobilization. Strategic command centers scrambled to verify what was happening. The young man's systems were already 3 steps ahead. He fed them clean data, movement trajectories, object profiles, power emission estimates. He didn't identify himself. He didn't need to. The information spoke louder than credentials. Above the atmosphere, the invaders spread into pattern. No single fleet, no uniform banner. Multiple species, multiple intentions, converging on one goal. Some ships deployed containment drones, optimized for capture. Others charged energy cores, signaling forced extraction. They weren't allies. They were competitors, united only by greed. Earth's militaries were fractured, unprepared for this scale. No central authority had planned for a simultaneous alien incursion. But now, with data streaming in real time, regional commands started reacting. Defense protocols engaged. Skyborne deterrence lifted. Still, Earth was outmatched in direct capability. The young man didn't waste time chasing parity. He rerouted dormant systems, civilian satellites repurposed into flare emitters, weather drones reassigned to jamming operations. Communications hubs were flooded with false pings, cluttering enemy scans. In coordinated pockets, countermeasure bursts disrupted ship-level targeting. Not destruction, disruption. Enough to delay. Delay was all Earth needed. Local forces began aligning with improvised coordination. Fighter craft scrambled. Defense batteries locked onto triangulated vectors. Small skirmishes erupted, brief, brutal. A few alien vessels were damaged. Most pressed on. But the illusion of Earth as defenseless was broken. Civilians now understood. Cities went into lockdown. Emergency channels played looping alerts, some unclear, others silent from overload. Still, the population adapted. Underground shelters filled. Hospitals restructured for combat triage. No orders had come from the top, yet movement happened. Instinct guided them. In one sector, an alien boarding pod attempted atmospheric descent. It never made it. The repurposed gravitic inhibitor prototype, built in secret from unfinished research, destabilized its internal field. The pod disintegrated mid-drop. The engineer behind the weapon never saw it fall. She was already working on the next refinement. Coordination spread through encrypted forums. Civilians with tactical experience assumed local command. Former soldiers resurfaced, guiding defensive formations. No medals, no titles, just action. The invaders faced friction they hadn't forecasted. Their plans had relied on speed and psychological domination. Instead, they met organized resistance seated not by government, but by those who had refused ignorance. The young man never stepped outside. He remained locked in his node, processing, directing, adapting. He tracked ship paths, recalculated energy pulses, redirected ground-based weapons with precision. Each second he bought aloud another strike, another interception, another citizen to act. One fleet attempted orbital bombardment. The targeting relay was hijacked mid-command. Their beam detonated harmlessly into upper stratosphere scatter. Confusion ensued. Ships recalibrated. A second beam was fired, and intercepted by a debris field of magnetized chaff, programmed to mimic surface infrastructure. Damage 0. Momentum shifted. Not entirely, but enough. The invaders regrouped, now slower, cautious. Losses mounted. Not catastrophic, but embarrassing. For a species that prided themselves on conquest, resistance from a so-called primitive world was not just unexpected, it was unacceptable. Internal squabbles broke among their ranks. Competing objectives clashed. Earth capitalized. Local defenses consolidated gains. Strike zones stabilized. Hours passed. Attacks dwindled. Ships began retreating. Some vanished without completing their mission. Others remained in orbit, inert, unsure. The battle wasn't won. But the invasion had failed to conquer. And at the center of that failure was a network born without command, fueled by foresight, and executed through action. The world had been unready. But its people hadn't stayed asleep. In a secure node beneath a mountain, a lone operator watched as alerts dimmed. He made no sound, showed no triumph. There was nothing to celebrate yet. But Earth still stood. That was enough. They hadn't anticipated failure. Not collectively, not individually. Every faction that participated in the incursion had calculated victory as a constant. Earth's value had blinded them. They saw resources, not resistance. What they failed to see was the mindset that formed in obscurity, resilience crafted in absence of permission. In the aftermath, fractured ships hovered in high orbit, some damaged, others inert. Their communications fractured, their cohesion broken. The planned extraction never occurred. Containment failed. Tactical superiority dissolved in the face of unyielding disruption. Earth's systems, though primitive by comparison, had shifted from passive to reactive in moments. Not by design, but by necessity. The invaders' command networks attempted reconnection. They met static. Jammed frequencies, decoy transmissions, data loops, all triggered autonomously. The planet had adapted faster than expected. No new orders could reach the ground forces. Stranded units withdrew or were neutralized. Those that persisted encountered coordinated suppression, not from armies, but from decentralized units operating without hierarchy. The man behind the systems monitored silently. He had learned early that the greatest advantage was timing. Not power, not numbers. Timing. Every measure he had developed had functioned within seconds of invasion. That window had saved the planet from collapse. He ran diagnostics. The enemy's fallback formations had disbanded. Multiple vessels had departed orbit at non-standard vectors, suggesting retreat. Others had powered down. Tactical analysis suggested a state of paralysis, strategic uncertainty reinforced by psychological dissonance. They had prepared for conquest. They encountered defiance. Global infrastructure, while bruised, remained operational. Communications partially restored. Civilian resilience surpassed projected thresholds. Blackout zones reconnected through auxiliary networks. Entire regions that had lost guidance re-established command through underground relays. Medical systems adapted. Energy grids rebalanced. Earth, scattered and surprised, had reconstituted itself without central command. Not every country had contributed evenly. Not all systems functioned flawlessly. But the convergence of fragmented action had created something formidable: momentum. A rhythm of resistance built from the will of countless individuals acting on instinct, logic, and urgency. It wasn't orderly. It was effective. He updated the alert map. No further incursions detected. Tracking systems locked onto retreat signatures. He rerouted sensor focus to deep space. Surveillance patterns widened. He wasn't watching the sky for safety. He was preparing for response. The network he built hadn't been dismantled. It evolved. Contributors who had once exchanged isolated information began coordinating openly. Their nodes remained independent, but their protocols unified. Data accuracy improved. Response latency dropped. This wasn't a counterattack system. It was a permanent shift in Earth's awareness. Earth's leadership had finally taken notice. Messages arrived from defense councils, space agencies, private consortia. Requests for identification, integration, cooperation. He acknowledged them with brief replies. He had no interest in control. The world didn't need another institution. It needed preparedness. Others stepped forward. Not into power, but into action. The retired Marine took charge of adaptive urban defense modeling. The propulsion technician led a team optimizing orbital kinetic deterrence. The linguist established an interception translation unit. No single hand guided them. They didn't need one. Above, in the void, the enemy watched. Analysis nodes on their ships logged every failure. Their culture had no context for resistance without central rule. No precedent for cohesion without leadership. What Earth had done didn't make sense in their frameworks. That uncertainty bred hesitation. They held a final council, encrypted, silent. No official withdrawal declared, but no reinforcement sent. The assault faded, not by surrender, but by erosion. Their silence spoke louder than any treaty. He archived the logs. Every pulse, every ping, every vector. The defense wasn't over. The cycle had only changed. Earth had shifted categories. No longer unknown, no longer vulnerable. Observed, evaluated, and recalculated. He ran one last systems sweep. Then, for the first time in weeks, he stepped outside. The air was cold, the horizon clear. Distant lights blinked on the edge of the sky, some human, some not. He didn't look up in awe. He looked in assessment. The world remained. Not untouched, but unbroken. And in its survival was proof, not of dominance, but of potential. The same planet that bred conflict had also bred foresight. The same species that delayed action had produced someone who refused to wait. No medals would be given. No monuments raised. Most wouldn't know how close they came to collapse. But it didn't matter. Survival wasn't about recognition. It was about preparation. The message had been sent, not in words but in outcome. Earth was not a conquest. Earth was a consequence.